Right, this is going to be another episode of Thorin's Rotations, and this episode is going to be centered around the LPL, technically the best region in League of Legends. By the way, that debate, should technically even be over, because the very people who are hyping LEC were the same casters that I noticed didn't vote any of the players who were in the first place team in the regular split as all-pro first team. So by your own logic, your own region doesn't even have the strongest players and the best teams, so sit the fuck down. LPL gets the spot, and they had all the cups as well, so... On that note, like to start the show, not a confrontation or anything. Right, the guest for this episode is, I've got on my right, on the screen at least, is Lyric, but maybe if you knew him when he was a coach, Jordan Corby. Obviously, he was on the Summoning Insight episode earlier this split to talk with me and Monty a little bit. He's obviously a commentator for the LPL. And then our other guest, if you remember, he was on a Narrative Wake episode, I think last year, maybe. It's FrVonLettow, which might sound like a complicated name. I'm just going to call him Frata, which actually is even pretty good, which means sort of like brother, basically, like whatever it is, isn't it? Like Latin or something. I'm not sure what that's from. What language is that from? German.
German, yeah.
There we go. So, and he is basically, he doesn't work in esports anymore, but you don't need to know about that. He's just a nerd for the LPL. He's one of the people... kind of the people I actually enjoy, who just, even when they're not getting paid, they just like to watch the LPL, because the thing I've never understood, maybe this can be a slight opening topic actually, is one of the funny things right now is the LPL hasn't changed in terms of how people play, like the philosophy of the teams. So like they still play the aggressive style that people like they go for it. If they have a set style that they enjoy, they build the team that way. Like the joke of it is, when people try to contrast like TSM and they talk about TSM as though it was this one entity, but really they're talking about like 8 years and like some very different lineups and players. The really crazy thing I find is LPL, just like in my opinion, LEC was right all along, which is you just build the way your philosophy for the game is. So like IG, like that's RNG. These teams have basically built the same team like 7 times with different players. Like IG doesn't give a fuck about the bot lane. RNG only cares about the AD carry. Like these are ridiculous, but they really do follow the same patterns. So like that's one of the reasons why I'm surprised more people don't get into watching the LPL, because I've always said, bearing in mind fans, the reason they claim to like LCS isn't just that they're North American, it's that they like the action and it's not boring like LCK to them. LPL has all of that, guys. It's everything you guys want. They even have the best of 3s everyone wants in the West. So I realise I'm fighting a losing battle here. People just aren't going to be into it. Whatever. The people who are nerds are just going to be the ones who watch Korea, because that's still considered the status symbol to be a hipster and be like, watch Korea, that's still somehow a thing. So... I've just learned to live with it, but again, I'll do my usual appeal. Like, if you actually, with the eye test, like to watch high skill level like an LEC, but you like to watch like radically different styles, you want to watch crazy fighting, you want to watch junglers who just go balls deep, LPL is your region. I'm serious. You don't have to, by the way, maybe this is the best way to, actually, this is probably the best way to appeal to him. Don't think, right, that you're going to watch it like you do LCS, where you watch, because it's best of one, you watch the whole day and you watch all the teams play, right? The best thing about LPL as well, just like LCK, is you can watch it like a real sport. Like, just pick 3 teams you like. Pick 3 of the top 6 teams. Just watch those teams when they play each other. Because first of all, they play each other loads, they play best of 3s, and the action is really exciting. Just watch the marquee games, basically. They are worth following. You don't have to worry about the rest. You'll actually learn about the rest as you watch those teams, basically. So, right, Lyric, let's start out here. What would you say about, what is your take on the strength of this split? Because I have to say, I always thought the LPL for like a few years now, I think Western fans haven't realised how deep it goes. Like I always say, for me, the best gauntlet in the entire world was always the LPL. So the LPL's basically nearly always had upsets as well. Like the last match of the gauntlet, there would be life and death. I don't think I've ever seen any league as strong as it is now, the LPL. Like the depth of teams, like the number of teams who could have been playoff teams, the number of teams who didn't make playoff teams that have like big names that you've known or have been to Worlds in the past. This split looks amazing for like depth of talent.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of it comes down to a lot of the like moving parts and rookies that came in. So obviously Top Esports being able to pick up Karsa and Jackie Love, elevated their gameplay. RNG picking up probably the most highly touted rookie coming into this year, which was Xiaolongbao from Young Miracles, following the same route as players like Tien. So Tien and Ning as well. We had Xiaoxi coming over from the Flash Wolves roster of last year, still very dominant in PCS. I think the most confusing thing to me this year actually was teams like Victory 5, which took all of the oddballs from a bunch of teams, put them together, And it was just one of those magical synergies that worked, that like the quiet players were like top in AD, their talkative players were jungle and support, and the magic was just there. But yeah, the depth of talent has always been here. I could even talk about going back to my coaching days in LMS, that we would scrim the mid-tier LDL teams, and they would be like the same level as a middle LPL team. Like the LDL, the top crop of LDL is actually really legit. Like just on an individual skill terms, I feel like there's just too many players in China. It's actually just insane.
Right, Frate, back in the day, if we go back like 4 or 5 years, like LPL used to basically be like most of the leagues. It was pretty stratified. You know, you had like 3 or 4 teams that contend for the title. Then you have the ones who like, you know, just making playoffs is their battle. Maybe they can grab the last world spot. And then you have like the middle table teams who probably won't make playoffs. And then typically you have the really bad teams who have no chance of winning. Yeah. What are your thoughts about this LPL split? Because I mean, if I'm sure people, if they only looked at like the Reddit headlines and saw who's winning the games, I bet to Westerners who didn't watch the games, like they don't know China right now. Like the teams that are good and the ones that are bad are all over the place.
Just coming from spring to summer, it's difficult to transition because you can see like teams like Easter that start really well in spring and they are non-existent right now in the LPL. And you can see teams like Victory 5 that were last in spring and now they are top tier of the league. They change most of the players. So in the end, it's quite complicated because China has shaped from like RNG, EDG, and then random Team WE, for example, to new teams that have no prior history, like Top Esports, JDG. They have a strong, like really strong brand behind, but they trust in players and they trust in really stacked teams. And that's how the LPL right now is for me. It's like every single team qualified for playoffs. Maybe not Team WE. I have my doubts on Team WE, but the other 7 teams, they are insanely stacked. Like maybe they have one player that is not good, like for example, Puff in IG, in my opinion.
Sure.
Maybe they have like not synergy, but in terms of players, they are insanely stacked. And that's what didn't happen in previous years in LPL when I think about 2016 and 17. Because 2015 was something similar until they reached Worlds. So that's another topic.
Sure. What do you actually think about that? I threw a lot out in the opening preamble, but what do you think about that topic, Frate? That like it is unusual to me, but the way that these teams historically, like a lot of them do seem to just have like, it's almost like, I can almost only compare it to like European soccer because there's a similar thing there. Like, for example, when I was a boy, right, the team I was a fan of as a boy, I'm talking like 25 years ago now, was Liverpool, right? And what's crazy is I don't follow soccer very much, but every like 5 or so years I'll dip back in. And every time Liverpool has the same type of squad that I used to watch when I was a boy. Like Liverpool's all about like attacking, aggressive players with like a loose style that are really skilled, you know, but that's because in those spots, you know, you have coaching staffs, you have like from the top down, you have like all this influence and philosophy on how they view the game. What do you think it is in the LPL in this sense? Because like I said before, like it is bizarre. Like IG doesn't have any of the players that were in those teams in 2013, but they still build around like the top lane's always a fucking carry player, mid lane like is what the game's all about. They ignore the bot lane, even though they're in the region where you have the other teams that only play through the bot lane. Like it's so. What do you think on this angle?
Yeah, every time that the LPL reaches playoffs, I look at the coaches because I feel like some coaches can dramatically change the matchup because of the experience they have or the drafting style that they have. One of these, for example, is Home, the coach of JDG. He's an insanely talented coach, really experienced. And you see that the teams that have been coached by Home, first it was like not so like confirmed, but Home was a coach of LGT in 2015. Yes. Then Team WE, when they won, actually, now he built this dynasty of JDG, if we can call them a dynasty, because they actually won one split. So Home is a perfect example of what you just said. Of even though esports are really narrow and you don't have a lot of years to compare, in 5 years, the teams that were coached by Homie have some kind of style similar. And you can see that JDG is that team right now because he's coached by Homie. And then, for example, in Sanin, I checked because I didn't know him. Maybe Jordan Lyric knows him more because he was a coach in the LMS. He has been following Sword Art and he was in Flash Wolves, I think. So it makes sense that the way of seeing the game that Sword Art has is in Sanin because the coach is also from that time. So I feel like, in a way, it was forced or it was like natural, but many coaches in the LPL have their own style historically, and that is seen in the team.
Because, like, put it this way, Lyric, I'll give everyone who's a Western fan a very easy contrast here. One of the teams that sort of fucked themselves in LCS, if anyone's watching that, is Evil Geniuses, right? And the problem they had was, even though the best player in their team, Jizuke, was like, anytime they won the game, he was the best player in the server. He would just pop off, he would dominate the game. The problem was, though, he wants to play those, like, really aggressive playmaking champions that roam, go 1-3-1, and LCS is not about 1-3-1, and plus this meta right now, everyone's vision of the game is you just get the dragons, you win the dragon fights, you win the game, you get the Herald of Baron, that's it. Like that, everyone thinks it's like paint by numbers. So as a result, EG literally took Jizuke completely out of the lineup, abandoned him, and went to Golden Glue to play like a boring, like control mage style and fight for dragons. Now the problem with that is they're now correctly playing the meta, but they're a worse team and they're just not a good team and they can't win LCS. So like obviously other regions don't do this. There's a lot of what I call like global meta thinking in League of Legends. It's like you're supposed to figure out what's the most optimal, and then you try in this analogy, you try and force the square peg through the round hole and it just has to get through, or you get someone that fits. What do you think about this? Because it does seem to me like, even more so than LEC, LPL is the region where it's almost like they decide what the good style is. They don't like let the game tell them what the style is, as it were, to differing success as well. Obviously they've got the talent to make it work, maybe.
Yeah, so I'll touch on the first part of that with the LCS thing, because I actually do follow LCS just a little bit, but because I think it's an easy thing to touch on from my coaching background, where it's very, like, I can understand why pretty much most teams in the world default to trying to play, you know, like you said, like the global meta or whatever is perceived as best, because as a coach, like looking back retroactively, it would be so hard to like nail down how to perfect a style rather than just looking at a freeze frame in the game and saying like, you know, this is right and this is wrong to us, right? And trying to be able to gear towards that right or wrong way as compared to like, oh, hey, well, I know my top laner is really good on carries, and I know my bot lane's really good on things like Ezreal and can play weak side. Let's try to like change the lens, change the dynamics of the game around that. I think that'd be quite hard. So I think that's a reason why teams probably don't do it. That's obviously not a reason not to, because especially after being in Brazil, which is a lot more player-centric, and now casting an LPL, and I actually watched a lot of LPL last summer, so I was already kind of gearing towards this framework. I think, and from talking to LPL teams, they are very player dominated. I'd actually say it's much different from teams like JDG and coaches like Home, who you can tell this guy builds the teams. When you look at teams like IG, when I look at teams like Top Esports, V5, even Suning, you're just like, okay, you can tell these guys dictate how the team is played. And if like overarching styles, like you said with IG, if IG played around top like 5 years ago and still plays around top, I could see that even being a follow-up of, sure, maybe not all the same players are in there, but there were players from now who did play with some players who had that mindset instilled in them already. So it just kind of like
the style. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. It's like a natural flow because, right, like when you look at IG and Puff coming in, Puff, even before, I don't think Puff wants to be more of a carry. I don't think it's in Puff's style to be more communicative or those things, right? So it's just naturally the way the pieces are built. Suning, to me, is a great example because you look at how their team plays. Bin wants to play those split push champions. He wants Jax, he wants Camille. Huanfeng is much more of a late game, like team fighting carry. So the way their style's dictated with Sword Art roaming a lot with Angel and SOFM, it just kind of makes more sense. And I think another great example is IG actually have a video series on YouTube, and it's translated in English. And a lot of their drafts, their coach tells them, hey, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And it'll be like, Rookie of the Shy, be like, no. Give me this champion. I know this champion shouldn't work right now, but I'm on this champion. I can carry.
Well, that's another factor that leads right into this topic as well. It's funny that to me, I have actually thought it's clear cut that the LPL is the best region. I watch all the big teams and the big games in all the regions. And when I watch them all, like, I always tell people the only team I care about from Korea isn't everyone's beloved Damwon Gaming that's having all these clean games. It's DRX, Dragon X Game, because they're the only one who look like they know how the LPL plays. So I'm still waiting for all those other Korean teams to come over and have a nasty surprise when they come to Worlds and find out that their meta is so alien to the LPL. Because what's funny is they're the team that gets criticised all the time, even when they're number one in the standings in LCK, because obviously LS is a caster. His whole terminology is that like Sinner comp thing, and DRX are the team who do all the Sinner picks. Well, the funny thing about this is when you go over and you look at LPL, by his logic, he should hate the LPL. It's all Cinecomps. It's all abusing what everyone's good at. Because what you're saying there is key. I'm sure some of the coaches are looking at the global meta. They're looking at, right, this champion's supposed to be strong or was buffed or nerfed. But the point is, when you have some of the best players in the world, it's like if the Shy says to me, nah, boss, give me this champion, I'm just going to do it, aren't I? Like, I trust him to know better than me. Like, if this for him is a skill matchup, well, he's got all the skill in the world, he can make that work. So that's one area where I also feel like it reminds me a little bit of how Europe was often very experimental with picks, because it's the same thing. Like, I'll give you a quick anecdote. Earlier this year, when I was doing my now deceased Elitist United show in Europe, we had an episode with FrVon, right? And what was great was FrVon explained how when that Misfits team got pretty good, and he was one of the main reasons, he even agreed that at the time LeBlanc actually shouldn't be like a priority pick in mid. In fact, it shouldn't even really worked at the time. Like, it was so many ways you could shut it down. It shouldn't work. But he just said, but it just works if you play it. Like, so I just pick it anyway. Like, I'll just pick it and like, I'll take those wins basically. Everyone else who's telling me like a nerd, like, shouldn't work for these reasons. Like, yeah, but it does. Like, humans make mistakes and they don't, they can go into a game thinking they know how to play something, but they don't. For me, the LPL also is like that in that sense. Like, people are just like, in a very extreme way, they're just about like what will work now. Right? It's not about like some overarching philosophy. What do either of you think? Just jump in on this if you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I agree on to point like one specific example that shows that a pick can be like unique for a champion, for a guy or for a team is Kennen on Invictus. Like, I have seen other players in the league play Kennen, but they have been so influenced by the Shy like outstanding performance with Kennen that actually doesn't make any sense in the meta right now. Like, for me, Kennen was a pick that worked for IG in the IG style, but that's it. And the thing is, when you see so many Renektons and Orns playing all the time, all the time, when they surprise you with a pick you don't expect, it works way better when the player is really good at that pick. So it makes sense that a LeBlanc for FrVon in that moment worked really well. And it makes sense that, for example, the other day we saw Lilia, the new champ, being played by, I think it was against, what's in playoffs, but I don't remember. They lost the 2 games. SFM now.
Oh, it was FPX.
FPX, yeah, thank you. It was FPX, and Tian was so hard on Lilia because Lilia had really like quite success in the in the regular season. So for me, Lilia was probably like a fixed idea of Tian. I want to play this because I know the champ is really good, and I know that it's going to be really good in this matchup. But actually, at the same time, you have the other side of the spectrum of, if the enemy team like has a collective better style, it's really hard to push that around. It's really hard to put the Lilia into the game. So I feel like one good example would be the Kennen of the Shy, and how the Shy and Invictus gaming plays around that Kennen because they know they can always come back with the Kennen ultimate. And one bad example is like Lilia, in the sense of Lilia is probably a really good champion, but the way that FPS tried to play it was not appropriate to that game. So it's like you have to always have the trade-off of being unique is good, but at the same time, depending on the moment, depending on the style of the team, and depending on the matchup also.
What about what we'll do is, obviously we're going to go deep on the teams that actually are still in the playoffs, but since people might not know actually some of the stories of the teams that aren't the big names, some of the ones we've implied earlier, let's talk about some of those. So like, we'll just start at the beginning. One team I want to ask you about actually is Team WE, because if people don't know, right, first of all, if you're a Western fan and you think, well, I know Team WE from the past years, you don't. Like, first of all, like Chia, for example, is still a player, but he plays for LGD now, mate. Like, everything's changed. Like, Team WE is basically just like wiped the board. They've come in with all these players that you're not going to know unless you've followed like LDL and the low levels of LPL. But out of nowhere, they've made this team that, again, without name value, they were looking pretty legit coming into the playoffs. Like, they had wins over some very real teams, and they were ahead of teams and names that you would expect are locks for playoffs that didn't even make it. So, Lyric, give us some thoughts on WE.
For me, WE is a really exciting team, and they're probably the epitome of actually what we've been talking about the past 2 minutes, of a team that is going to ignore absolutely everything that is meta or good in League of Legends. They're just going to pick exactly what is best for them. The 2 star players of this team that are interesting is their jungler Beishong. I actually think he was a top 3 jungler all split. I think you could even say, like, argue for first place and it'd be reasonable. And their support Missing, and they're the 2 kind of long-standing members of this roster. And the thing that's so interesting about WE to me is the way they've played all year has been for jungle. They'll have Teacherma on something like the Galio, the Aurelion Sol is one of his mains. He used to pull out Nocturne, Pantheon in the mid lane. So all of these champions.
So he's trying to be the new Doinby.
Yeah, exactly. He's actually pretty much budget like store brand Doinby. Because like people meme Doinby for laning at Worlds.
Of course.
My God, Teacherma cannot lane. Teacherma is like negative 20 CS every single game, but he always has these globals. He's always able to get to bot lane first or get in the enemy jungle first, set up Beishang to be this big carry. And this team also falls in line with what you're saying earlier of all LPL teams still have to fight and are aggressive because that was WE. They're going to get like Pantheon, Echo for jungle. They're going to gank mid at level 3. They're going to start bringing that towards bot lane and looking for these like 5v4 team fights and things along those lines. And an interesting thing is you said they don't really have name value. Their owners even come out and said that was the point of this roster. It's like, hey, I'm not trying to spend big bucks.
Right.
This team was a success. We spent as little money as possible and we did good.
Exactly. And I want to point one thing out because I'm not that positive on Team WE. I'm positive on the intention of the organization, but I'm not positive on the team itself because I feel they got really backed, like the meta advanced and they didn't advance at all. Because like as we said, Teacherma is like a Doinby 0.5. Like he's what Doinby does, but worse.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's like they have a style. And that style is really easy to punish by good teams because I have like counted their matchups against top teams, and the only top team that they have won. Remember that in LPL is only single round robin, not double, so you only face the same team once in the league, not twice. It was JDG. Like they lost against FPS, IG, LGD, Sanin, TS. They won a lot against bad teams. So the thing is, for me, Team WE is a prospect for the future, built upon an infrastructure that is really good, insanely good. Actually, like Teacherma, Yumeng, Shubin, Yuyanjia, and even 369 was in King of Future in the LDL, so they have some kind of relation with Team WE organization. You have a lot of teams around the current roster of WE. Actually, Teacherma and Yumeng are from the academy. So I feel like this team is going to be really good in the long run, and that is actually what Team WE did in 2015 when they signed Shigi and Mystic in that EM Katowice, I think, that ESM won, that they had the long-run prospect, not the short-run prospect that many teams try to do. And that's really good. I think Team WE, maybe in 1 year, maybe in 2 years, but they are going to be a top team sooner than later.
I agree.
And then the one thing, again, that will, if someone's a Westerner, you haven't been following LPL, you will be shocked because that one thing I saw all year long is people who don't watch LPL saying things like, I wonder how that team would match up against FPX. Like, FPX, of course, still one of the best teams. Like, have you been watching 2020? Like, I don't know if you've been following, guys, but like, if anything, FPX is doing a really good job of convincing me what I actually thought personally after Worlds, which is that like, just like IG before, they locked in like the perfect meta for them to win Worlds. Like, I don't think that they designed the team that way. Like, because you see this year when they've brought in Khan, massive name signing, obviously already played in the LPL in the past, that when they've brought him in, like, I want to get your guys' thoughts, but this has been an abject failure of a split for FPX. That they weren't even actually very good for most of it. The Khan experiment, they themselves seem to think that's a failure because they keep yanking him and pulling the plug when it gets to the 11th hour, as we say in English, like when it's at the very end. And you see this playoff result here, losing to V5. Listen, we're going to talk about V5 in a minute. They're obviously a very good team, but that's the time when you're supposed to beat them. Like, as you said earlier with the eSpar, that's where, like, yeah, cool, you had the nice regulars, but you never played me in playoffs. So I suppose FPX is supposed to get round that one. So, like, what do you think here, Lyric? What were the issues of FPX? And why has this Khan approach just never worked? Like, it's one thing at the beginning. Obviously, he has a very different style to Gimgoon. But you'd figure for a team that has won Worlds, you'd think eventually you'd figure out how they make it work, you know, like what the right mixture of players, comp, whatever you'd have to do. Because they're all, like, it's clearly a good team. He's clearly a good player, but there's some disconnect there. Yeah,
so starting off with why FPX kind of failed this year is, I think it's two parts, right? I think, you know, the meta is definitely part of it. I think a lot of Doinby's champion pool especially is kind of like fallen out of bed of they've tried defaulting back to that other way that Doinby teams have always played, is putting him on scaling champions like, you know, Kassadin, this year Azir, historically been like Ryze and Victor. And I don't think especially their bottom lane are in form to really play out this scaling game. They've tried to default back to what made them successful last year. They've gone back to the 4-man dive bot style with Gimgoon back in the team. But I think one of their games in the regular split against RNG is the perfect example, where RNG brings Xiaolong Bao down every time. Xiaohu has TPs to answer the play every time. And by the third dive bot, I think it's like 8-0 in RNG's favor. And they've literally just killed FPX every time. So I think there is a bit of like teams have figured this out. Tien hasn't played as well. I think the jungle meta has really outpaced them as well. And when it comes to Khan, that one really bothers me because we see so many fans say like Khan is bad. And I actually think Khan was one of the better performing parts of this roster, especially in summer. Not necessarily in spring, but their team just struggles so much when Tien is playing around topside. And again, their bot lane has looked horrible in lane. Like, my God, they've gotten 2v2 killed so many times. I don't know what's up with Crisp. He's been playing Nautilus like every game. It looks like he's a champion pool issue when last year he was the best support by far. He's actually played 20 games of Nautilus this split, which is, I'd say, pretty concerning. It has a lot of bad matchups. But the only thing where I think Khan has really failed is Khan's team fighting isn't as good as Gimgoon's. I think Gimgoon just has like a really good read of champions like Mordekaiser, champions, you know, whether it's like an Ornn or a Volibear. He's really good at playing this disruption role on a backline, getting in the enemy AD carry and mid laner's face, and giving room for LWX and DoNB2, you know, kind of win out in a lot of these fights to where Khan took them a lot more patiently. I don't think Khan was like horrible on champions like Ornn or things along that nature, but a team like FPX needs a soldier who's just going to go in and go forward, and that wasn't Khan.
What do you think, Frata?
Yeah, I agree. And I want to point out that there are two types of mid laners in the LPL right now. Those who play Zoe and those who play Karma/Galio. Like, they are quite the two different styles, easy to identify. And the problem with FPS is that they have a mid laner of the style of Galio, but Karma, but they are not playing as the style of Galio or Karma. If you see, for example, Victory 5, they have been doing a lot. Like, Vivu is not their strong player, but actually for their team, it's really easy to set up like dives in the top lane because Vivu plays a lot of Renekton and is really good on those type of dives. So what V5 did is, look, okay, I pick like Twisted Fate, I pick Galio, and I dive in the top lane with the jungler. FPS didn't do that. Like, FPS focused a lot on when we play with Khan, we gank Khan, we don't dive with Khan, and when we play with Gimgoon, we try to do this old-style dive in the bot lane with Crisp, and it didn't work out. For me, it was a problem of understanding the meta first, and second, also, like, maybe I have to say that this is not like necessarily a link, but most of the players in FPX are really old. And the league is getting a lot of newcomers that play different than the classic style mids or junglers in the LPL. So I feel like maybe in 2 years or 1 year, they shut me down because they start playing well again. But I feel like the newcomers are better mechanically in the long run, and also they have more adaptation to the meta that they are playing. And this is a huge concern because it should not be.
Yeah. I think to add on to that, it is like publicly known as well, like going with age, is Tien apparently has like a pretty bad wrist injury. He said like many times this split, like he actually cannot practice a lot, and Tien looks pretty bad. So like things like that do correlate.
I mean, DoNB is a veteran. Crisp and LWS are from 2014 or 2013, and then
Gimgoon's been on forever.
Yeah, from Game Talent
forever.
Yes.
So I feel like FPS need a change. Maybe it's not a whole change. Maybe they can like keep like Tian and DoNB, for example, but they have to like bring some fresh players from the LDL. Like other teams did. They actually had PP God in FPS.
They did.
That's brutal.
And they have LWS and Crisp in the bot lane. For me, that was like... But actually, I have to say in favor of FPS that many LDL players, they normally swap from the team they were. Like, it's not that common to have an academy and bring the player to the main team rather than this academy player play for other team in the long run. You have FrVonLettow, for example, that was in IG academy.
So sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but it's like the competition in the LDL is so fierce that it doesn't matter who signs it, someone will sign the player. Like FrVonLettow will be signed, like Yumen will be signed. So it may not end in the first team. And when it ends in the first team, maybe it's not the best pickup because the style is not the proper style. Like, let's say, for example, Lijan. Lijiang was not made for IG, but you know, he was really good in the LDL and actually played with Juan Feng. So imagine Lijiang, for example, in the place of SOFM. That could actually work, in my opinion, because they have similar stars to what Sun Gaming plays. So to back up with FPX, I think it's like, maybe it's a meta-only related topic, but I feel that in the long run, if they want to stay as a top-tier organization, they have to bring fresh new players.
I'm definitely with you, by the way, Lyric, on the angle that, like, because here's the problem. If people tell me Khan's the best top player in the world, I'm going to be critical of him. It's going to sound like I'm hating. But I have always said this, even in the teams where he hasn't been as good, like obviously SKT didn't get the success they hoped they would internationally with him. He's always been a straight fire top laner. If you let him play carries, you gank for him, and he can split push. Like, if he can do these things, like the obvious team he should have been on is like IG. Like, they would love a guy like that. Like, they basically got a team built to play for him. You'd have fucking Ning in his lane every time. The problem is, you can't go and join the team that just won Worlds by like top lane's weak side. We abandon it. We just play for like bot. Like just logically, that like you saw that doesn't work. First of all, and then secondly, when they tried to make it a Khan team, basically he was the only good part of it. I'm with you on that one. Like I don't actually think he takes the blame for this. He does in a sense that like he can't play the way they want to. But I feel like that's one where it's like they bought a player that they didn't seem to understand the identity of. That's the part that's puzzling to me. You know.
Yeah, that's also what didn't make sense to me, and it's also quite weird how, like, so again in their recent V5 series, FPX actually beat V5 in the regular season with Khan, and one of V5's biggest weaknesses, in my opinion, is they are horrible at answering plays on side lanes in mid and late game, because they are one of those teams that like will overcommit 5 men to an objective like 2 minutes early to secure they get the setup. So when they played against teams like FPX, EDG was the only team that 2-0'd V5. They played things like Camille, and they just hard split pushed the whole game. And sure, it might not be as good right now, but V5 would always end up losing like 2 turrets for 1 or 3 turrets for a dragon, something along those lines. So I was so surprised that when FPX fell down 2 games, they didn't sub back in Khan. And the funniest part is they actually had Gimgoon play champions like Jax in that series against V5. So it just blew my mind.
Yeah, and I have to point that out, that is really interesting about a B5 in global, that is actually absolutely true that they play around one objective, and the teams that play the least styled SPL game win against B5. Like if you play macro-oriented, styled, try to focus on vertical jungling or side lanes, like pushing every single lane, you will probably work well against B5. And the top tier teams have tried to beat B5 in a way that it's harder, it's possible because they are really good, like say TS, for example. But it's like, you don't play their game. It's like, I remember this sentence from Attila, ex-member of Vitality. You don't play rugby against Vitality. It's the same with B5. You don't play their game against them. You play smarter than them, because they are young, they don't have like leadership as the other team have. So going back to FPX, I think FPX fit that, because FPX is a team with experience, with leadership, they can be smarter. The problem with FPX was that against other teams it didn't work, but against V5 it worked, except in playoffs, obviously.
Let's just transition to talking about V5 then. So if people don't know, this is an example of where you'll know if someone's watched LPL, where if they're like, who? It's like you weren't watching the whole split, mate. Like, for basically right up until the last few weeks, V5 were legitimately one of the best teams in the whole LPL. And again, this is another squad where you go and look at the names. These are not names that were expected to be here. Like, this wasn't like some coronation of like, this is the next great rookie. It's like, some of these names were surprised. And as already alluded to by Frata earlier, like, in spring, they were one of the garbage teams. They were one of the bottom feeders. In fact, the joke was, because he also did change position a few times, everyone just made the joke, didn't they? Like, it was like Maul 5 and he just plays every position. And like, if they could clone him, then they'd be a good team. But the joke is, now, all the hype's about the support players. It's PP Gods, the one that everyone loves, and now this team's had all the success. So, start us off here, Lyric. Who the fuck is this team? How have they come out of nowhere? And listen, obviously they're not going to win LPL this split, but they've already done, to beat FPX is a big deal. Like, this is already an impressive turnaround.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely love this team. I love the way they play. I love how the players on their roster mesh together. So, kind of starting from the bottom up, the PP God hype is obviously all for the funny name, but the skills are there. I honestly think he was a top 3 support this split. Honestly, if someone wanted to argue and say he was the best, I don't even think that's unreasonable, though I do also think it comes to players like Ming and Chris, like really having bad splits. Like we didn't have a standout support, but PP God was still insane. He was doing well in lane. He was one of our most proactive supports on the map. And that translates well into their support jungle synergy was the best in the league, honestly. The way that PP God and Sam D facilitated Weiwei's aggression was really good to see. I would honestly say Weiwei was the best player on this team. His like tracking of enemy jungle, his jungle sense, how he would set up ganks, dives. Like he was a very versatile jungle. He was willing to put the team on his back and carry. And the last interesting facet of this team is the one you already mentioned, Mol5. This guy plays every style. He could do the Zoes, you know, that we talked about. He could play that Galio Karma style. Yeah. He's just a man who is willing to kind of be the missing piece of the puzzle, but he has the mechanical skill to kind of be that second tier of mid laner under people like Knight and Rookie.
Yeah, and I also have to see it in a bad perspective, because there's so many good points about this team that you cannot blame anything about this team. They are absolutely new, like 4 new members. That pointing something negative is actually cruel. But I feel like the problem with this team, the only main problem outside of experience and the classics cliches that you can say, is that they are not top. Maybe in terms of performance, yes, but in terms of quality of the players, they are not top 3, top 2 in many of the positions.
Yes,
like they lack some kind of like. Imagine this team is like with, let's say, Knight, or let's say like just one.
Just give them a superstar, basically. Yeah.
That's what they need. And actually, PP got the support was the superstar, and Weiwei, I absolutely agree with Lyric that Weiwei is the best player in the iteration. And for me, what is really interesting about this team, because I love to talk about how matches with LDL and how these new players come, is that 4 of the players, Piu, SAMD, Weiwei, these 3 players played in Sunny Next in different times, 2 of them, but they played in the same organization before, and being the top laner of Sunny played with them. So they actually had some kind of synergy that is hard to find when you sign newcomers. Like I remember the Giants that went to the LCSEU with Jisuke, Attila. They were the same group, and even though it's a different team and even though they play a different style, having the same kind of members makes the synergy easier. And B5 was that team because they had a clear style, how to prepare, how to play. And they just played it. And maybe it was not the best style. Maybe in the future it's going to be bad in a meta. But if you play that style to a really good point, you can beat even the best teams. And that's what happened. You beat the best teams, you lose to the worst teams. So I think this B5, it's a pity that they have no chances to reach Worlds because of how points are in the LPL. They are out of the contention. But at the same time, like I want to see them next year. I want to see them as superstars.
The sad thing about this team is so 3 of their players were on like short-term contracts, the 3 Suning players, and it is expected that they're going to go back to Suning next year, which is so disappointing because this team, it's like a WE to me. It's like, sure, this team now wasn't going to be like the top team in LPL, but if you gave this team another year, if you gave this team another 2 years, you know, maybe you change 1 or 2 players. I think both SamD and BB were fine, but they were probably the 2 roles. If you get a superstar AD or top, this team would have been so amazing. And I think the last point to point out is not just how the Suning members came with the synergy. The surprising part to me was how PP God and Weiwei had such good synergy for 2 players who never worked together before, for 2 players who were the shot callers of this team with very little experience. Like PP God's a rookie. Weiwei's only played on like Suning for like a little bit, obviously did end up getting rebenched for Hacker back in playoffs in summer. So just the way these 5 players came together is just like that magical synergy that some rosters do just have.
Sure. So, okay, the other team that in the quarterfinals went out was, again, another big name, IG. Now, this is a weird one because actually, bizarrely, because they're such superstar players, etc., I notice IG is one of the few teams Westerners seem to roughly sort of like check in on because really they just want to know, like, are the Shine rookie playing awesome? That's all everyone wants to know. So the basic, from my perspective, it was like, it started out looking really bad for IG. It looked like, fuck, they're still terrible. In fact, actually, it was even worse in some senses because when they first made that change to bring in the bot lane, Poff and Southwind, right, Like, initially, my assumption when they recruited those, like, I look at those players, I'm like, this is like when SK Telecom brought in Bang and Wolf. Like, the whole premise is, like, our job is, like, sort of, we're going to be like a weak side bot lane because we have the god tier solo laners. So we know what our job is. Our job is don't lose lane too hard in a team fight. Do what an AD carry does, last hit the fucking champions. But the problem was, that duo really did start to have some issues. Like, I know everyone focused on the Shy inting because he was doing some terrible shit and Ning being up and down, but that's just because those are the players where it looks like they're inting, they just show up as deaths on the screen, but their bot lane was having problems. So I'll tell you one area I could never have predicted, because I'm a dedicated Baolan hater. And I can't deny it. This guy actually did start turning the team around when he came back in. I don't know what it is, so I'm opening it up to you guys. How did Baolan start to save the team? Listen, it wasn't just that. Like, for example, the Shy did get really good again. Ning started to actually look like he knew what he was fucking doing. But this Baolan move had something to do with it, right?
Yeah. I absolutely agree, in the sense that Baolan was the key factor in the middle of the season. And the thing is, for me, they committed a killing of a guy when they signed Southwind, because I remember when we were in the last, like when it was in Narrative Wake in February last year, I talked to Raz and we agreed that Southwind was insanely good and he was playing in BC Gaming, but we also agreed that Puff was not insanely good. So the problem is that you are signing a mechanically gifted support player that makes plays. You don't need to make plays in IG. Like, you have the Shy and Rookie, you have enough carries. You have to enable them. You have to give them the tools to carry. And Baolan, in a sense, has this Roman style that fits well with Rookie and the Shy. Because if the Shy is purely alone in the top lane, he will win 100 times and win 100 times. But if he has some support, some of the times that he dies, it's actually in benefit of the team because they will have a skirmish. Rookie will appear with Orianna. I remember against TS, that Rookie had a play in the top lane with Orianna that he didn't fail a single Q. That was the most impressive play of the year for me. It was not like shiny or it was not explosive, but it was so meticulous. It was so detailed that I really loved that play. So for me,
that's how good Rookie is, by the way. He's doing fucking highlights on the most boring mid lane champ of all time that everyone plays. This guy's still a monster.
Dude, he blind picks it and wins every matchup by like 10 CS. It actually makes no sense.
That's one of the reasons, by the way, why, like, we won't go too deep on this, but I actually do think if people, because the problem in team games is they just get too blinded by the team success. Like, if you win the championship, you're the best. So as a result, like, no one can catch Faker because he just has too many cups and championships. So in reality, most people think there's no discussion there. I'm going to do some content on it soon, because I actually think if we just look with the eye test at individual level of play, there's a really interesting discussion of, like, Rookie versus Faker over their entire careers, because there's another thing a lot of people don't know, right? People understand when they watch international play, especially when he goes against Western teams and dumpsters them, that, like, Rookie is a god on, like, aggressive champions, assassins. Like, they don't seem to get it. This guy also then goes back to LPL and makes his fucking money playing, like, Galio, Orianna, the boring champions, the ones that you're supposed to just sit in lane on. Like, he's just a monster player. Yeah,
in your last show about NA, you talked about which players can fit different styles, and I thought instantly of Rookie, because I remember in 2016 and 15 he was playing Lulu mid to support an Echo's jungling of Kakao. Like, this guy played Lulu mid to support jungler. It's like Rookie for me is another level.
To me, like, so night one MVP of the split, to me it should have been Rookie, and I think it's like definitely like arguable.
He had to carry a lot more, right?
Yeah. Man, he, especially early in the split, especially if you watched MSC, like, this guy was playing by himself every single game, and he was still having pop-off moments.
That was when the Shy was terrible, if anyone doesn't know, by the way. Like, he was really inting that one.
And even in spring playoffs, they played against top esports. And, man, it was so close. They definitely could have won a ton of those games. Afterwards, Knight said on stream, he's like, dude, playing against Rookie is so hard. Like he always, like, crushes me in lane. Like, I just don't know what to do. And that series he did. He pretty much outlaned Knight almost every single game. He has such a big impact on the map. Like, this team would honestly be like 12th if Rookie wasn't on this lineup.
Yeah.
It's actually insane.
Yeah, if people want a good comparison, the comparison would be what Caps did for G2 this split. Because everyone thinks in their brain, oh, the G2 players are all monsters. Like, bullshit they were. They only started getting it together at the end of the split. It was Caps that had to, like, carry them in the meantime. And it's funny because this just shows you how there is a lot of sort of, like, media narrative that plays into how people view the game. Because if you ask people who the best in the world is, like, I also might say Knight's the best, like, mid laner in the world. But The other player that people mention, it's either Knight or Chovi's people's pick, basically. Or maybe if they're a European fan, they're going to throw caps in there. Rookie, I think it's just voter fatigue. They're just sick of this guy being the best every year. It's put it this way, this was not a bad year for Rookie. It was just a bad year for IG.
Exactly. And actually, we have to talk about the playoffs that they played, because we didn't say anything about that. Yes. And actually, I think CJ was one of the few mid laners that can handle Rookie in the LPL. Because thing is, against Rookie, you don't play to punish him, because he can, like with a mage control like Orianna, he can come back with a shockwave. He can do things that doesn't matter how behind he is, he will come back. So you can do that with the Shy, and that's what LGD did in a sense. So Shige was not like the type of guy that is going to win lane against Rookie, but with a champion like Twisted Fate or Galio, he can roam to other lane and Rookie can't follow because he's with a control mage. Right. And I think that's one of the key factors of that matchup against LGD. And it's not about CJ being better than Rookie, not at all. It's about LGD being way more intelligent than IG. I think that series is, for me, the best example in the year of two things. First, why Nidalee was so picked and banned in the LPL this year, and mostly summer. And second, why IG is the perfect definition of the Sun Tzu's quote of, if you know yourself but you don't know the enemy, you will 100 battles, but you also will suffer 100 battles, like would lose 100 battles.
Right.
Because when they play in the best level, they can beat anyone. But if the enemy team knows them, like LGD showed, they can win against them because of outdrafting, or like, for example, if I remember correctly, in that series, they also picked Nidalee, but at the same time, they counter-picked last in the red side top lane. When you are facing Langs against this Shy, like, who will counter-pick for Langs in a like theoretical scenario? No one.
No one in RNG, that was for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God.
But in this scenario, it works so well because Shige could like dive 100 times the Shy. They could punish the Shy, and when you punish the Shy, there's only one threat in AG. Only one threat, and that's Rookie. So it's easier to beat a game with one threat than two threats, right?
I do want to add, I feel like a huge part of the series was also, my God, Kramer and Mark just slaughtered Puff and Balan in lane. Like, every game they won lane. Game 2, they got a 2v2 kill in lane, and it just set up Mark to get out of lane, roam, and set up Peanut. And again, when we saw Mark on these, CC champions like the Lux, like the Leona, and then Peanut just never misses an Italy spear. Like, God damn it, I can't believe they didn't ban this champion sooner. That, like, the Shy didn't even get to play League of Legends because Mark was always topside, because Puff and Balan, my God, like, I always thought they were just average, but boy, did they just suck in that series.
Puff played most of the season Aphelios, and Aphelios is not as strong as he used to be. So that's a core factor, because with Aphelios, you can actually farm and then output damage, and that's it. But when you have some champions like Ying, Ashe, you have to be more useful for your team, and they weren't useful at all. And at the same time, I remember one play in the third game when Mark threw a Q with Lux to Rookie and the Shy at the same time that won the game. And we are talking about Mark, a Rookie, well, not Rookie because he has been in Sino Dragon for a long time, on Dominus, but we are talking about not successful support, not shown by the Western world. Yeah, exactly. For me, that series, if the two first games were like Nidalee and how LGD played. The third game is Mark. The third game is definitely Mark with Lux. Like, the third game could be won by IG and then a comeback. The whole series.
The Kale game.
Yeah, but since Mark,
do you remember Puff's Jhin play top lane?
Yeah,
with the 5 bullets. My God, man, that was hard to watch. How do you miss every single Jhin bullet?
By the way, since you brought it up, that is one thing that I've also found very bizarre in the global meta, is that particularly if you go to LCS, it's famous in LCS that nobody can win on Nidalee. As in, it's not just that they're all bad. You can't just laugh and be like, haha, they're all just shit. Like probably the best jungler, in my opinion, in the last split in LCS was Closer, and even he couldn't ever win on Nidalee. So to me, that suggests that the teams themselves just don't know how to use that champion. They don't know how to play around it. As you say, in the LPL, it's a super dangerous champion if you put it with a really good jungler. So what's the difference? Why is the LPL thriving on Nidalee?
And to add to that, to your point, I remember Santorin was famous for Nidalee in EU. I'm not sure, 100% sure, but I remember in EU he played a lot of Nidalee in solo queue.
Okay.
So the thing is, the difference is in timing, like how LPL is played. I didn't watch that much LCS to be sure about this 100%, but I feel that the LCS is more like long-oriented games, And Nidalee needs to like farms a lot in early game, has so much gold and experience advantage over the other jungler that in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, he outputs so many damage in teamfights that wins the game.
So LCS isn't snowballing it off, basically.
Yeah. I'm not, as I'm saying, I'm not.
No, I think that's accurate. That's what people often say, basically. It's all team fighting still, mate.
So
I've watched a lot of LCS, and I agree.
So to sum it up, I feel like the difference is like if you want to win in 25 minutes, Nidalee is an insane great pick. If you want to win in 35 minutes, Nidalee is quite awful because it gets out-scaled both in damage and both in impact. Like
it's kind of like old school Lee Sin before the reworks. Then,
yeah, and if you see the players
going early, right?
And if you see the players that play Nidalee in jungling in LPL, those are like Peanut. You have not Ning at all. You have like not ganking junglers. I have two more names.
Wei did a few times. So it's players like that.
Wei, and there's another one, but I don't remember right now. I think no, SOFM no. SOFM is Graves' player. But there was another
played
one.
It, but it was banned against him a lot.
Kanavi played 4 times, and Wei played 6 times. And then Peanut did 6, but obviously with the playoffs. So the thing is, this type of players, Kanavi, Peanut, Wei, they remind me to put an example of the LCS historically wise to Meteos style when he started in Cloud9.
Farming style,
yeah. You farm a lot, invade the enemy jungler, and pressure the enemy jungler. So that style is really stereotypical for the LPL right now. I feel like you have 2 styles. You have 2 styles of mid laners. You also have 2 styles of junglers. Like ganking junglers that enable the team. You will say Ning. You will say Karsa, exactly, with the Lee Sin. That play with Karsa was insane. And then you have like invading junglers like Wei, Kanavi, and SOFM. So
I think
that's what
another part to it too is we have I think we draft around it much better as well. Like you typically see Nidalee with something like Set in the mid lane. Like I think probably about half the Nidalee picks probably had Set mid or some other like AD champion that could just like ignore the enemy, push the wave, and actually set up for Nidalee to farm, snowball ahead, and get going. Another factor is I also feel like LPL just uses things like Ashe, obviously way more than the other regions in my opinion, but also better. Like we do typically see like the second an Ashe hits 6, we're gonna see an Ashe ultimate play, either invading the enemy jungle on the enemy bot lane, or in mids, like really start the snowball that we just set up to go forward.
Yeah, I have to point out that it doesn't need to be a bulky champion or a tanky champion like Set. It just needs to be a CC chain champion, like for example Twisted Fate. That's what CJ played actually in the series. But I fully agree, and I also feel like we'll see it later. But for ADCs, there's also 2 styles. And the Kramer style is really good for Nidalee also, because he's a player that can be like, he reminds me in this moment of his career to play in a sense of enabling the enemy, because you also have enough carries in LGD. You have Shige, you have the Peanut, even the support can be we have seen Mark can be a carry, a playmaker. So you don't need a playmaker in the ADC, you have to output damage. So Ashe is a perfect example of how to play with this team, with LGD.
Let's actually transition to that, because obviously like they're one of the teams we're going to talk about. Let's talk about LGD. On that one, let's just keep that track going about Kramer, because, Jordan here should know Lyric, because in his era when he was in the LMS, people don't know this, Kramer, even though he's Korean, came up in the LMS actually. It was over there where he was like a banger, and then he came to the LCK and was in LPL as well. And the problem I've seen is this: every time he's been in LCK, he almost only gets criticised, right? Because the big problem is if you know Korean AD carries, except for like some of the more newer school ones like gaming and stuff, Korean AD carries traditionally, they're sort of the bitch of the team. Like they're like, there's a reason why Teddy's the best. Like they don't want like an Uzi Eye. They don't want a guy who warps the whole game to him and you have to play through him and you put every resource in him. Because the Korean way, old school of playing the game is you get small advantages and you spread it to the whole team and you win with macro. Like you don't just have one carry that's like an LPL vision, the carry that's the god and you just load everything into him. But it's funny because whenever he's in LPL, everyone loves Kramer, because what Kramer very much is like, he's like an LPL AD carry. Like he wants all the resources. He's going to play super aggressive all the time. And in the team fight, he's going to just try and max DPS. He's not going to care about dying. He's just going to max DPS. So this is one of the players where I see he's kind of like, he's like brought his career back by coming to LPL. I know he's not the main part of the team, but there's definitely other players. But what, do you have some thoughts on him, Lyric? You must have seen quite a lot of him in your career.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still remember, I think it was that Worlds, I think it was against CLG where he got hit by like the cocoon. He got subbed out the next game for NL, and that's when he ended up going to Africa. Poor guy, but he actually had a really rough start in spring. I can't blame him too much because the roster of LGD was not good. He was playing with a rookie support named Chance. But even in summer, I think most of the split he's been like all right. He's been pretty good, but this team, they do put a lot in bot lane. There were I have some funny memories where Peanut level 2 ganked one game is Lee Sin and one game is Set. These, like, I guess Set kind of can because you take Hex Flash, but Lee Sin especially, you're not a level 2 ganking jungler, but you know Peanut is going to put everything into the bottom lane to set Kramer up to be that big late game carry. I'm sure Kramer's calling for it. He wants all the farm. His positioning in team fights is, I think, one of the best in the league. Like, he definitely knows how to deal that max DPS, but he also has some like obvious flaws. He still gets caught out, which is kind of funny that I referenced the CLG moment, because that actually happens like pretty often where the enemy team will control like the top side jungle. They'll be the ones pushing like mid and top lane, and Kramer will just be like, you know, those Raptors just sound really delicious right now. You know, walks in and it gets one shot. I think Kramer's fine, but I think he's heavily facilitated by this team.
I agree, and I also have to add up that against IG, since IG doesn't care about the bot lane, you cannot catch them if you are not there, right? It's like, for me, the matchup was heavily favored against LGD, even though for me IG is a better team, even though right now. Like for me, IG is a better team, but the matchup was kindly favored for LGD. In regular season, they won against IG. So for me, the doubt about this team is that their flaws that were not shown against IG and are going to be shown later. I think it's against the TS, right? Yeah.
Yes. Jingdong.
Yeah. I always confuse that. I have like read it like 100 times. I always confuse the matchup. But yeah, against Jingdong, I think that the point is those flaws are going to appear like as strong as their positive parts, or it's going to be too much the flaws for them. Like, because I'm not sure. It's really complicated because Mark outplayed like the enemy bot laner, and Mark played way above his average.
Yeah.
So I don't think I don't trust LGD still. Like the only member that I trust fully is CJ. CJ, I trust him fully, but I don't trust Peanut. I don't trust Langs because Langs won against the Shy, heavily supported by Mark, but still, it's really complicated for me to trust them. In the tournament.
I do want to point out one thing that's awesome about Longxing is after they beat WE, they were doing media day, and he got asked an interview. How do you guys think you'll do against IG? And he's like, I don't know how we'll do against IG, but I can tell you guys, I am going to get absolutely crushed by the Shy. So, you know, I can respect a guy who has, you know,
a very reasonable perspective. Yeah. No, that's by the way, if you just look at his career as well, I mean, like I joked about before, if you were a top laner for RNG, you know that you're not getting all the resources and dominating your lane. That's just your world, isn't it? Like, you just learn to live with it.
Exactly, and it's kind of nice because I actually think he wants to play like that now. From the way that LGD came together, like it seemed like he was actively a part of the team, saying, "Hey, like Moses, but don't play around me. Give me Ornn, like whatever it is, like the beaten like wife syndrome kind of thing, where he's used to not getting anything and he's like kind of grown accustomed to it." So it was really interesting to see them play towards top, you know, the way we've been talking about with the Twisted Fate. But I also agree. I think this team has some flaws that. They were lucky because WE, by the time playoffs hit, didn't belong in playoffs. And, I mean, IG just, I mean, my God, I don't even know what to say about the IG performance, but especially in mid to late game, LGD were a team to me that fell apart so many times. They're actually one of the, like, lowest win rates when they have a gold difference at 15 because they'll get to a point where they're on their power spikes. They're at the Dragon Soul fight, but Mark and Longxing have just been such poor engagers. They're just not willing to pull the trigger unless they find that perfect moment for the fight. And it's going to end with the enemy team engaging on them. And, you know, now they're the ones in a losing position, fighting off an angle that they don't need to be in. And I agree. I can't really trust that Mark is going to have the best performance of the year once again in a semifinal.
Yeah. And against Jadon, I mean to put inside the players that they are going to face. They're going to face Lumao and Loken in the bot lane. Like, probably Lumao is the best support, in my opinion. It's actually debatable, but I think it's the best support. And Loken is the most consistent ADC. In my opinion, it's not the best.
Looked so good, like the split, actually.
No, his split. This split, I think he's actually. If you see the history of Loken in the LPL, he has always been consistent, and maybe this split is the best one. But in terms of like ceiling, I think there are DCs that have higher ceiling than Loken in the LPL, and not one. I think like Yakilov, Yumeng in the future, or maybe even close. Juan Fen played that insane gene. Sorry for the pronunciation. I am not used to the pronunciation.
Oh yeah.
But Juan Fen has an insane gene. Like I was insanely surprised by his gene. When you mentioned that Puff failed all the missiles of the ultimate, Juan Fen didn't fail a single one. So I feel like in terms of like consistency, it's hard for LGD to punish the bot lane. I think it's impossible to punish the bot lane. Maybe they like deny me, but I feel like at this point they have to play way different than they play against IG. Like for example, around mid lane, because Jagao is really good, but he's not the key player of Jadong, and he's also not a star right now for me. So maybe they have to switch their playstyle, and switching their playstyle is not as easy as punishing the enemy's playstyle, in my opinion.
By the way, whoever made this particular LGD roster is like a chef's kiss, because they understood what I call role balance, as in, like, as I said before, you don't want to have like a Khan if you played through your bot lane, because logically, like, your jungler's just being like, it's like those old torches where they used to put you between the two horses and they go in opposite directions and rip you in half. Like, you're never going to be able to do it. So if you look at the team they have here, first of all, the players all fit the style that they want to play. But then this is the craziest part to me. They're all throwaways. They're all the players that everyone else said, I'm done with that guy. So Lang Xing, like we said, everyone considered him just the worst version of all the classic top laners from RNG. Peanut obviously has been and had his time to be the best in Korea. No one believes him in Korea. Shie has been a very good player for a long time, but people thought, maybe his best periods was in the past. Kramer, like I said, never really fit the Korean style. And then the support, nobody even wants. So, like, the idea you've put this team together and it works together. Listen, as you said, Freya, it's not going to win LPL, let's be real. But the fact they're even in contention to go to Worlds, I'm very impressed with whoever put this team together.
I honestly can't believe they're even in this position. Like, I thought with WE, like, even though FPX's form was bad, I thought, okay, well, LGD and WE are just write-offs. Like, they have no chance against IG. Like, they just didn't look convincing. Like, they're a lot like how people talk about Team Liquid and NA, where you just watch their games, and sure, they win, but you're not sold on how they win, and they just do it so consistently. But for me, whoever built this roster is you know, like, to be praised. And even their coaching staff, they have former players. I think like Pokemon and Aime are their coaches. So yeah, I think this roster is built really well. And yeah, I think it's going to be exciting because they do still have a chance to go to Worlds. Like, even if they do end up losing to JDG.
Yeah. And I have to add a point to the fact that if you see last year, FPX, I actually said really bad words about FPX. I didn't expect them to end as they ended. And if I learned something, is that you don't underestimate a team that has nothing to lose their players. Like, all of these players have done their career. Maybe Mark is the only one that absolutely has a lot to do.
He just never made it all. Yeah.
But Peanut, Shige, and Kramer, they have done insane things in their career. So when they have nothing to lose and they have experience, they still can win something, right? Like, no one of them is like world champion, to say something. Like, Doinby was not a world champion. So I feel like this team is the team that you don't trust in the whole run. You never trust them because you never expect them to win. But when they win,
don't count them out.
Yeah, but when they win, it don't make sense because they had nothing to lose. They had great players. They have synergy, whatever. So for me, in the matchup in semifinals, I expect them to lose. But if they win, I'm not as surprised as I was like before IG, for example.
Oh, okay. I agree. Like I actually think I think both semifinal matchups for me, I honestly can't pick who's going to win. I think both of them, after the performances Suning and LGD gave us, are just like, man, I seriously have no idea. They look so good.
We obviously also should say a word just about the jungle mid of LGD. Like, first of all, Peanut is a player where he's another player I feel like. I know you were born Korean, mate, but you were supposed to play in the LPL your whole career. Like, think about Korean junglers. They are classically the boring, like, vision, control the map, do not gank all the time. That is not your job. Like, your job is to track the enemy jungler with the tracker's knife, look at his CS, like, all the boring shit that is definitely not Peanut's game. Like, Peanut is the fucking LPL stud jungler. Like, you give him him the Nidalee or something, he's going to go off. You give him a Lee Sin, he's going to have a crazy game. And then he's obviously paired in Xia. Dude, I said this on Twitter. I think he's going to be one of the most underrated LPL players ever, because he's never gotten his credit as like the big star player, right? But look at what he's done. He took WE back to the LPL Championship. He went to Worlds, he went to semi-finals, and we're like, this guy's done so much in his career. And I get it that he was never the best mid, but he's always been like a banger. He's a playmaker. You look at all the champions he always plays. He's the guy where he roams around, makes plays on the map. Like, to me, I won't say he's a winner because he hasn't won loads of championships, but he's like, I love watching this guy play. He's been one of my like fan favourites, as it were, for many years.
I think there's a misconception between Western and Eastern in Xiye's character. I feel like the Chinese value more Xiye than we value them, because we value him. Because I remember when Xiye started his career winning being second against TSM, but
yes,
like they kicked out the favorites that were Koreans. I think it's Fox Tigers.
Yeah, it was Rocks.
It was this iteration of Spirit, Xiye, and Mystic.
Yes,
that Xiye and Mystic continued for like 3-4 years. I think it's 4 years, right? Because they finished in 2019.
Yes.
So for Western people, since they only reached Worlds once, and they have only seen them in that year in Katowice, and they forgot the names.
Yes.
They have no idea about their career. But for Chinese people, they have only seen a consistency. Yeah, maybe in some moments they have flaws. Like
they were in semis of almost every LPL at
Yeah. So I feel like Xiye is, to make a comparison, is as Nukeduck is for Lek. But Nukeduck in his good moment, not right now, obviously. Like
just consistency, always one of the best,
Like, he can match any single good mid laner in the LPL as Nukeduck can in the LEC, but not this year, but previous years.
Yes.
He can also give new champions. He can adapt to new playstyles. Like, Xiye is the guy I will build a team around 100%. Because he can match any partner.
What do you think, Lyric?
Yeah, I think he's been extremely impressive this split. He obviously didn't have a chance to be impressive because last split he was on DMO. But he's very versatile. It's so strange to me how he's willing to sacrifice himself for the team so much, because this was the only team in LPL first picking Twisted Fate every game just to, be able to play around his side, set up his jungler quite well and do things like that. And I mean, obviously Twisted Fate could have a ton of bad matchups that you don't want to play into, things like Syndra, but he never cared. He was always willing to take one for the team. His laning phase is solid. He's not a world beater like someone like a Knight or a Rookie, but he's not going to really lose to anyone. Exactly. And I feel like he's like the true essence of, maybe even like, I think Nukeduck was a great one, or even like Bjergsen at his like consistent highs, where maybe not these past 2 years, but I think like the 2016, 2017 Bjergsen, where surprisingly, though he probably could be a star player if he wanted to be, he plays for his team. And I think Xiye is kind of like that. He probably could be the consistent, third or fourth best mid in LPL if he wanted to play these hard carry champions, but he's always going to play for the team. And I just want to circle back to Peanut for a second, because I think this is the time to do it, because I think Peanut is an outstanding jungler right now. And in spring, it's sad that more Westerners don't watch LPL, because this guy was truly a top 3 jungler in spring when his team was terrible. His team had nothing on it. Chance, it had Yuki in the mid lane still. It was going between top. Heck, they used Fun top lane, who, if people don't know, is the mid laner for E-Star right now. Like, they were an atrocious team, and Peanut was still one of the best junglers in LPL, like, by far. So it's been a pleasure to be able to watch this guy kind of have a career resurgence.
Yeah, one of the reasons, by the way, I also say like he's an LPL jungler is because one of the things I always hated about LCK when I didn't understand it, when I first started watching it and I was like, I got that new Monty and people like that, and I would always message him like, dude, why did they just like back off and let the teammate die? Because in like classic OGN like Korea before like the more modern meta, if they notice right that one player gets caught, but they're like, I don't know, this is probably like a 40% chance we win this fight, they just back off and sacrifice him. They're like, right, everyone else back off base, like go back to the macro game, we'll find another chance to get back in. The reason why I always thought this guy should be an LPL player is, in the LPL, they just follow up. They go into the fight when you go in. So if you're someone like Peanut, dude, you were sat in the career, your whole career watching like MLXG, like this is where you needed to be. This is the dream place for you to play.
They follow so much that then you, as we talked previously, you have teams like B5 that they only follow one lane and they have all the rest of the map uncovered. So yeah, I fully agree. But I have to point that for me, Peanut is even not so much aggressive. Like, he's not a ganker. He's the style of invading, like Sesov FM and Kanabi. Actually, even though he's an LPL player, as you said, for me, it's not as much LPL player as other LPL players.
Right.
Like, it's so funny that a guy that is so aggressive in LCK is not enough aggressive because he's not the playstyle that he plays in LPL. So for me, it's like
I wonder if he was actually influenced by Kanavi then. That makes me wonder if there was something to do with that, the timing of when he came over.
He did gank more in spring for sure, and he still ganks a bit now. I think he definitely ganks more than people like Weiwei and Kanavi, who, I mean, again, these guys only invade.
Yes.
But his style definitely did transition to more of that heavy invade style in summer. I mean, I guess you can't really invade in spring when all your lanes are losing, so I guess hard to know.
True. In that scenario, I think you do just farm up. If you're in the team he was in spring, it's the only chance you have to win. Right, we're on to the semi-finals, and we've obviously set up 2 of the teams, but one team we need to talk about still for this one is Sunning. Now, this is one team. Listen, obviously teams like WE were a shock to me because I don't know most of the players, or I've only watched them in the odd game where they played like an exciting upset game or something. But I'll fully admit, right, I had no expectations for this Sunning lineup because I remember last year, I was one of the people who the whole year was like, right, when is this Sunning with the big names going to kick in? When are all the players I wanted to see, Sword Art and Maple? Like, this is time to go, boys. I can't wait for this. It's going to be so... And then nothing. Like, they basically were mad underwhelming the whole year. They never figured it out. So then they get rid of those players. They only basically keep Sword Art. They bring in, like, in some cases, like, sub players. It's not even like they went and just got all the next talent. And this team has been way above the level I expected. I'm very impressed with this as a newer squad. So, Frata, maybe start us off on this. What do you think about this team? It sounded before like you were pretty high that like they could maybe even make it to the final potentially.
I have like many hot takes that I'm quite sure Jordan is not going to agree, because I'm quite hype about signing that I was never, like, as you said last year. Like, they didn't need big names. They need big players. And I feel like people are underrating Bean so much. Like, when I saw the global all pro teams, it was, if I remember correctly, Zoom, obviously. The Shy the first, I disagree 100% with the Shy the first.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think it was not View, but it was 369.
By the way, anyone out there putting the Shy first for top lane, you're like fucking people who are still saying Faker's the best mid lane. Like, could you start watching 2020 League of Legends, please? Like, this is the past you're talking about.
So for me, Bean deserves to be in the top 3. Okay. And I even debate to be in the top 2 or top 1. Like, to be honest, Bean, the problem with Bean, let's start with the part positive of Bean. Bean is what the Shy should have been this year. Bean is an aggressive player that likes to split push, but can match the team and can play around the team and team fight insanely well. He's an insanely jax player at 369. He has outstanding performances with Camille. I remember one playing the top lane, diving the enemy top laner that was insane with Camille. So this is what the Shy should have in this season. And the thing is, you don't expect that from a guy that is 18 years old or 17 years old that just came from Sunning S. And then Juanfen was like growing all the time. Like, he started really quiet. He was not shining in the early season, but his last matches with Jhin has impressed me so much. Like, he has been insane with Jhin. A champion that you don't expect anyone to excel, to be honest. So for me, this team actually is not favored, obviously, because JDG is like, or TS, sorry, I was confused. TS is insanely good. They have insane players, top 3 players. But I feel like if they perform that like they performed in the last matches of the season and in playoffs, they can actually defeat TS. Like, Bean can defeat 369. Juanfen can play better than Loki because Logan is more consistent, but the ceiling of Juanfen for me is higher. And the problem that I see is that they are somehow predictable, because SoFM is like, in his history has been...
He's a known quantity, come on. We all know this guy.
Yeah. And then Sword Art has played too much Nautilus to a point that maybe he's like doing everything in communication, but in lane you can't predict what he's going to do, how he's going to play. So I feel like the problem with this team is that they are predictable and they are young, like Bean and Juanfen.
Yes.
But they are so skilled in terms of like mechanically, individually gifted players, specifically top and ADC, that I see them winning against TS.
Oh, that's a hot take, right? It's the way he just threw that in at the very end. He said all the rest, they just threw in like the spiciest part in the last fucking few words. All right, we'll get to that. Go on, Luke, give us your thoughts, mate.
So, I at least agree with the positions he's highlighting. Like, So for any viewers who are gonna, end up watching this, Huanfeng is like the future of the LPL, in my opinion. He is going to be like a Jackie Love in the future. Like this guy, I think, is so individually talented, it's insane. And Suning do not really play around him. Like they don't actually put like a ton of resources into setting him up in team fights and things along these lines. He is just kind of left to fend for himself, and he does great at that. And he mains Draven, just like Jackie Love. So that's always pretty baller. But Bin also as well. I agree. I think he was definitely a top 3 top laner. I think if you look at the whole split, I think I could respect if someone put Zoom and 369 above him. But still, the point is, it's this guy's first year. He was by far the best like split pushing carry top laner we had by far. He was, solo killing so many players. He actually had the 3rd highest solo kills in all of the LPL, which is pretty, insane to think. But honestly, coming into V5, I thought this team was going to lose so bad. I like coming off of their last series of the split where they looked so bad against Vici. Vici threw 2 games in a row. They lost to FPX with Duinbi Bot and
the troll game. Yes.
Yes. And and Suni were trying hard. Like they wanted to win. They wanted to guarantee that 4th seed.
Sure.
And the thing about Suning in the regular split was their early games were so slow, in line with that SOFM farm-heavy style, in line with us setting up Bin as this more like scaling split-push player. They had the lowest first Dragon % in all of playoffs. They had the lowest first turret percentage, the lowest gold difference of 15. Like, statistically, this team did not come online until like 25 minutes into the game. And that is the perfect team for V5 to steamroll, because V5 is the opposite. V5 they will crush you, or they will get crushed themselves. Like we're going to play early and it's going to end early no matter what. So the interesting thing to me was they changed how they played against V5 to where I think it was a reaction to V5 to where V5 was playing heavily around Bubu like we saw in the FPX series. And they just left Bin to like take it by himself. Bin was like playing 1v2. He was outplaying all of the matchups, outplaying all of the dives. And Suning's read on the draft was so smart to me, where they were taking all of V5's champions. They were taking away the Ashe. They were taking away the Zoe. And they were taking the early dragons. They were forcing the Rift Herald fights where we've been saying V5 only knows how to do one thing. They only know how to go forward, overload that side of the map, and fight. So when Suning had all the better champions for that style, they just crushed V5 so hard in 3 games. Honestly, I think it was more of a 4-0 because they threw game 1 and they should have dominantly stomped. But yeah, this team to me is so weird because they played so different in their one playoff match to how they played the rest of the split. But they do have the mechanical talent to match up with a team like Top Esports. The question to me is, how's this team going to come up against Top Esports? Are they going to keep playing around bot lane like they did against V5? Are they going to keep drafting like that? Or are they going to tailor their approach? Because this team was so exciting to watch with the prep they had against V5, because that's what I think beat V5. They lost to the draft. They lost to the prep. They lost to the read that Suning had on them. And if Suning now, had a week to prep for Top Esports, I actually think they could win. I still favor TS.
Yeah,
but
for obvious reasons, yeah.
The funny thing to me is I've been talking to a lot of players and coaches in the LPL, and they make it sound like Suning's gonna stop TS, which blows my mind. Everyone's going, "What, you think Top's gonna win? No way, they look horrible." Yeah, it's quite interesting.
I mean, if you see the series that Top have played recently, the way
the split was bad, sure.
Yeah, the way they lost against IG was dismantled completely by Rookie, by one player. And the thing about Top is that I think in the current level, Jackie Love may be better than Juanfen. I've been a historical lover of Jackie Love, so I maybe overestimate Jackie Love in the sense. Obviously Knight is going to be better than
Angel.
Than But But the thing is, for me, what makes it better Sunning is that what you just said reminded me of LGD 2015, because it was a team that played really bad in regular season. They ended 4th or 3rd, but they win the title because they swapped their style and they played with the high ceiling of their players in playoffs, and then they just clashed and burned in Worlds. But the difference here is that I see a Sunning with one key player that can stop them from clashing and burn, and that's Swordart. I feel like this is the perfect balance type of rookies and experienced players. Because you have SOFN, who is Vietnamese, has been playing since 2012, I think, in the Vietnamese scene. You have Swartat, who has played since Gamania Beers in 2013. And you have Bin and Juan Fen, who are completely new, and they can be like guided by Swartat and SOFM. So I feel like this team is the only team that has a ceiling that doesn't need to be potential. Like for WE, it has to be potential. You have to wait some years.
Yes.
For Sunning, you don't need to wait. Like this weekend, they can just win TS. So these huge rookie players can be the difference in terms of ceiling, because their opposites, Jakilov and 369, they are good players. They have really insane ceiling, more Jakilov than 369. 369 is more like diverse, but they have flaws. Jakilov has been having flaws in laning phase since I remember watching him with Kok Mao. With Kok Mao when he was a one-trick pony after Draven. 369 is more stable, but he doesn't excel at anything specific. Except Jax, I feel like he has played so many champions this year that it's quite complex to see a high stake of him. And then Knight, who is the strongest point for TS to win against Sunning, in my opinion. He has been insane. He's probably the second best player in the league right now, but he has played 18 champions this season. So I feel like you don't need diversity to win Sunning. You need to stomp in the mid lane with mid and jungling synergy, because SOFM has no synergy with his mid laner. Yes. So do TS have the synergy to stomp Sunning? That's the key factor for me in that matchup, because the bot lane it can be won by Sunning, and Bin has the tools to win against 369.
That's the concern I have. I'll be honest, one of the main reasons why when I first saw this lineup of Sunning, aside from the fact that they'd had to basically get rid of some of the big names, and like, for example, Angel used to be just the sob behind Maple, so it's not like they brought in big names to replace them. It was that they had SOFM as the jungler, mate. I'll just admit it. Like you said earlier, this guy's just known as a bad jungler in the LPL. He's never been good. At best, he's always been one of those players. It's like, why is he still in the LPL? This is a bit weird. So it's not like the fact that this team's good now means he's been really good. I actually still don't know what he's doing, really. So, like, I remember when he used to be on those teams. You remember this, Frat, with fucking when Flandro was like the carry top of the that used to be Flandre versus the fucking world, because this jungler never did anything for him. He was the bomb. So, by the way, I give Knight even more props that people are calling him the best player in the world, and he doesn't really have like a very good jungler. You look who else. Some of the other best players in the world in that scenario, they all have their best junglers with them. Like, I think it's amazing they can operate with this jungle situation, this team, and still be competent.
But Karsa has some kind of enabling gang style that can actually fit really well with top. Like, I think Karsa will fail harder with other teams, but he plays like the champions that TS needs him to play. Like, his leasing was insanely good. I remember, I think it was against IG, even though they lost. He has a play like around mid lane that he swapped it over only by his mechanically. So I think Karsa is a bit undervalued in that sense, because I feel like obviously he's not as good as other LPL junglers, but he is probably the best jungler in the style of TS. So that's why my question is not more.
You like his intelligence?
Yeah, it's not like I know that they are not going to stomp Sunning. Yeah? It's a question. I have no certainty that they will do or will not. I think it depends a lot of not only Knight, but more like Karsa and Knight. And I feel like they can do it. Obviously, I mean, in public, they are the favorites, right? But in my mind, since I favorite SN because of what I've seen recently, I think if there's one point is how Karsa and Knight are going to perform.
What do you think, by the way, about actually Karsa in general? Because I noticed, like, the big problem is he always seems to, it's like he never can do a perfect split. He always has weird periods where it looks like he's slumping or he's a bit like off on his play. But then, like, there's a good reason why he's been in so many good teams. Like, he clearly does have a good mind for the game. He's fit I notice most of the teams he's in, they must take his direction because they always seem to fit his style. What do you think, Lyric? What do you think of where Karsa's at the moment? Karsa's
a weird one because, I mean, this is obviously a guy I know his career like firsthand. I've been there for pretty much all of it. So, because Flash Wolves heavily played for him. Like anything he wanted, Maple and Sword Art would do. Maple and Sword Art would give him. He played everything, you know, whether it was, you know, a Graves, a Lee Sin, a Gragas, any style, Karsa was king. He goes to RNG, and I mean, it was very publicly said, like, Karsa is going to do what Uzi says. Like, I mean, that's just the way RNG all play. But coming on to TS, him and Knight had like anti-synergy in spring. Like they did not play together at all. It's actually funny. One of the other LPL casters, Dag, that went through and counted the amount of ganks he attempted mid. And let's say he attempted 20 ganks. 18 of them would end up with Knight or Karsa dying instead of the enemy mid or jungle. So it was not good. Obviously, Jackie Love comes in. Some like switch kind of flips. I think it's a bit overrated how much credit Jackie Love gets for Karsa playing well in the early game, because I can say, coming from a team, there's no way Jackie Love is telling Karsa what to do in the first 10 minutes of the game. Like, exactly. That's just not how it goes, especially when you factor in Karsa doesn't play around bot, like, at all. Karsa never touches Jackie Love and Yuyanja's lane, which, you know, makes sense. Yuyanja's there. I hope we can stay away from that topic because, oh God. But he's been weird to me, because I still think he's kind of like chained to the team. Like, I don't think Karsa gets to choose what he does. I think he heavily plays around what his laners want. Like for Uzi, now he's playing for a Knight and a 3-6-9 because he's not playing. He's not playing much Nidalee. And these are two champions that he spent his whole career in Flash Rules, not only dominating LMS, but dominating internationally. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense that he isn't able to pull it off. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where he has to play this like really low economy, heavy gank style, especially for mid and top. Like, man, he ganks so much. But for me, Karsa is really, really clever, because you'll watch a lot of games where he pulls off so many like small windows to like pull off a play. TS engaged so many like 4v5 team fights where Karsa does hit the Sonic Wave on Lee Sin, does get the Insect onto the AD, they delete her instantly. Well, now it's a 4v4, and now suddenly Top Esports win the fight. So I think Karsa's really creative. I think he's really smart, and I think he's willing to sacrifice for players that are more star player than him.
When people say that thing, by the way, that like Jackie loves the shot caller or whatever, it's like, as you just said, he's not like high in Cloud9, like microwaving everyone around. And also, he's the fucking AD carry. So when they say shot call, they probably just mean he calls stuff like when to rotate to the dragon fight or something, or like if, stuff like that. You know, or if he's like fed, he's just rotating how he wants to do the fight. He's not really like he's not the chess master, guys. Let's calm down a minute. Like, he's not telling the jungler what to do, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, that one blows my mind, because again, he probably is like a large voice in mid and late. No doubt, 100%. But again, they act like, oh God, 369 is going to cover Scuttle at level 3. Holy shit, Jackie Love's calling is so insane. It's like, my God, dude.
Sure, he's not end his game, put it that way. It's not like that. What about, so, I mean, you alluded to it there, but let's briefly touch on it. Because one of the weird things, actually, when you consider, like, I don't even need to, it's not even debatable. There's no league in the world that has as much talent as LPL, not just because they have the most teams, but like, as we're talking about, dude, there's sub players right now who aren't even going to get playing time, except for the odd game, who would be starters in other regions. I mean, some of them we've even talked about in this episode, they just didn't get their chance at the time because a guy with a bigger name or a bigger contract was in front of them in the past years. So, the one weird thing I've noticed that hasn't changed about LPL, though, is you still get teams that are the best. And just like when I flamed earlier, that even when IG was winning Worlds and, you know, was actually supposed to win that MSI probably, I still thought the whole time, like, how the fuck is Baolan getting away with this? How is he on these teams? Like, dude, look, I know there's good supports in LPL. So similarly, the one player you have to criticise on TES, everyone else is mustard, everyone else is good. It has to be the support player. Like, how is this guy in this team? Like, I don't get it. It's not that there's lack of, there's loads of good support players. He's like the player where I might sound like a hater, but I think he's carried.
The thing is, if you see the LPL right now, because before playoffs, you will say, okay, PP God is better than Yuyanja, you have Lemao is better than Yuyanja, Sword Art, but now you have to also add Mark. And it's like, where does Yuyanja go then? Top 7, exactly. Top 8, top 9. Yeah. Ming is also in the best scenario, like better than him.
Xiaoxi's better than him.
Xiaoxi's better than him. It's like, wait, don't crash.
Missing's better than him. Oh my God, where does it stop? Like, oh geez.
So just to sum it up, I feel like the only good point I can take from Yuyanja is that Yuyanja is what Jackie Love did, actually. Because Baolang, like, Jakilov doesn't need a laner, doesn't need to win lane.
He's never had one, so I guess he has no choice, right?
Yeah. But I've seen Jakilov even in solo queue play in a way that doesn't matter how bad the lane goes. If the support is a distraction in terms of CC and in terms of shields in the team fights, he will do well. And I think that's the definition of Yujanja, even if it's so harsh. It's like it's a guy that he played Yumi this season when no one was playing it, mostly. Yeah. Nautilus, Thresh, and Brown. Like he played Leona, but he was not a main Leona. So I feel like he was playing this kind of champions to enable in teamfights Jakilov. And actually that's what TS needs.
He's just playing CC bots, basically.
Yeah, not only CC bots, like some kind of shields, like pull the Thresh Lantern when Jakilov needs it, like put it the front line with Nautilus when Jakilov needs it. So I feel like, obviously, they are not going to do well in laning phase. But if you take in consideration, okay, which support do I sign if I were TS that is not Yujanja? You cannot sign PP God because Jakilov is not the PP God style. You cannot sign Sword Art because you don't need that kind of experience with Jakilov right now. And maybe it's closer, but it's not like a supportive jungler. Maybe Ming is the guy I will sign if I were TS. I will sign Ming because of his history with CCI.
Of course, yeah.
And how to support in team fights. So you have to go to Ming, right? You cannot go to the star supports. So it makes sense that Yujanja is playing in TS because he has the style that TS need, even though obviously there are way better supports in the league.
Okay, fair enough. Right, by the way, another thing that never gets out, and this is so sad to me, right? So in Korean esports, one thing they're very famous at, by the way, is like coming up with like cool nicknames or like identities for the teams. But one thing that China is the number one at is they have the best memes. But the reason why I say they're the best memes, because people probably know I don't like traditional internet memes where it's like, can I has cheeseburger? Because it's just stupid, right? Why I like memes? Because the way I do my banter is, I don't just sit there and think up jokes. The banter comes from like a real piece of analysis that you think about a way a player plays, something he does, and then a joke comes from that. You think of a funny way to phrase it. The Chinese memes always have an element, like when I said before about it being Mole 5. The premise was the banter isn't just like they all saw. It's like that Mole literally did play all the different positions and was the only good player. So like it's like the meme has like a logic to it. The meme about 369 is fucking amazing because the premise is because his name is 369 they meme that he's like a dice, like some die, and the joke is when you roll it you don't know if it's going to land on a 3, a 6 or a 9. So if you get the 3, that's the guy, you know, who's probably cost him the championship a couple of times now and just doesn't show up at certain times. If you get the 9, sometimes happens in the regular split, people start calling him the best top laner, like we said earlier, even though he probably isn't. So this is a very interesting player to me because normally, like traditionally, let's be real, unfortunately top lane, and in the LPL especially, hasn't been like the main carry role. It's often like it's the tertiary carry, it's the third carry, it's the mid and AD carries where they play. So normally you want consistency from that player, and this guy for me is anything but that. But I can see why people hype him though. When he hits his peak, when he hits the 9 as it was, he can look like a monster. What do you think about this guy, Lyric?
I actually love this guy. I think he's great. I would have put him on my LPL first team top lane because, like, early on in the split, when everyone was saying he was the best top laner, it was obvious why. Like, this guy was playing insane League of Legends. He had games where he was actually carrying, not Knight, not Jakilov. I remember, like, certain Wukong ults, he would, like, find the angles to hit that were just absolutely beautiful. And we even talked about earlier how he plays everything. Like, he can play the Shy style, he can play the Jace, he can play the Lucian, and he can dominate lane, but he could also play things like a Mordekaiser and Ornn and be that team-oriented carry. So that's why I like him. He's kind of like the best of both worlds between like a Zoom and the Shy, who are kind of like two ends of the spectrum. Yes. He's the nice middle ground, so I think he fits teams much better. And the thing is, I actually don't think he hits 3s all that much. Like, luckily, he hit a lot of 9s this split, and I think he has a lot of like average performances. But for me, the problem is, like, with how many resources he gets from TS, like, it made sense when he was carrying a lot of the early split games because Karsa is constantly ganking top. Karsa ganks top more than any other lane on top, which is surprising when you think, wait, Knight's on that roster, Jakilov's on that roster. But 369, especially in the later half of the split, didn't play bad. He just wasn't really there. He wasn't really a factor. And I think there's a bunch of factors to that, honestly, but I think for the fact that he will never be like the Shy, where you're having a crazy carry performance every game, but you're also not exactly Zoom, where you're going to be this reliable tank every game, right? You are that middle ground. He'll probably always be rated as like the second, third, or fourth best top laner, depending on the meta.
Right.
Yeah. And I also have to say that in this moment, 369 is its highest average pick. Like, not very his highest pick, but his highest average pick in this season.
Okay.
Like, for me...
It's more like 7, 8, 9 then.
Yeah, more like 7 and 6 and 9. Yeah. So for me, the problem, because if we take into consideration globally, I fully agree with what Lyric said. But as I said about Sanin earlier, he's facing Bin now. Like, this matchup for me is one of the keys in the playoffs, in
the specific matchup. Yeah, of course. I mean, by the way, it's like I alluded to earlier. I listen, there was definitely mistakes in the last LPL final, but like, bearing in mind everyone praised Zoom, like 369, homie, that was your lane, mate. Like that's why you're not the champion. Like, your team had everything to be the champion. So obviously people are looking at him as the X Factor. Do you think it's going to be for this series as well then, Frata? I
think if Sanin wins, for sure is the X Factor. Like, the thing is, as I explained earlier, for me, the key for top is to play around, even though they have bad synergy, as Lyric explained, that Karsa and Knight get stomps the duel of SOFM Angel.
Yes.
But if they play top lane, like if they try to gang 369 all the time, I don't think it's going to go well. It may be, but I have seen SOFM how he has passed in the against B5, and he has invade all the time the top side. He tried to play vertical jungling, but really bad because he's SOFM. And I think that Bin has supported him so much that it succeeded. And since Bin, for me, is more skilled than 369 in the long run, and in this series also, I think that can be really successful. Like, if Karsa wants to win, I think he has to avoid 369, and he hasn't done that in the whole season.
No.
So it's complicated. It's actually complicated. I think the way that Karsa has to play this series is to dominate the Drakes, dominate the bot side, to make sure that Jakilov gets to late, until late 20-25 minutes and team fights, and the Knight is way ahead of Angel. So
I do want to add on to that as well, because I think I've actually been doing a ton of TS prep, because I'm actually going to be casting that series today, and like I've been doing my prep today. And in games where TS don't get a favorable matchup topside, like I was actually watching the Suning one earlier where he was playing Maokai against Renekton, and they aren't able to have that like reliable rock in the top lane, having push, being able to fight for those early heralds. That's when TS look really lost. Like, that's when they can't rely on Jakilov and Uyanja in the bot lane to find their own advantages. I don't think Karsa's even really comfortable playing with Uyanja. No, like their synergy isn't there. So I at least agree in the sense that top lane is going to be the pivotal place on the map for me in this matchup. If they can't get Bin on, like, if they can't first pick the Renekton, like we've been seeing, you know, everyone doing in LPL, or get a counter matchup for him, I think TS are going to have a harder time, and they're going to have to rely on like the clutch factor coming in, which it's kind of funny that clutch isn't really a word that's used in like League of Legends, but it's used so much in like CSGO, because I feel like, especially when you watch LPL, like you're like, my God, this word like belongs here. You watch players like Knight, you watch players like Rookie, like Jakilov. They win so many games they shouldn't win because Jakilov pops off on Ezreal, or Knight pops off on Syndra or Sylas. And at the end of the day, it's that reliability with the TS players that I'm going to think they're going to win. I think, like a lot of people in EU think G2 will win, not necessarily for any specific reason other than, hey, it's G2. They've been here 1,000 times before. It's Knight, it's Jakilov, it's Karsa. I feel like these guys are reliable, but that top lane is going to be the place to watch.
I would Renekton take, if you see the V5 versus Sanin matchup, Sanin drafted insanely well around the Renekton, because when they wanted to draft the Renekton, they knew the enemy is going to draft Gunplank, and Bing won the lane. When the enemy drafted the Renekton, because they banned in the first game, because BUBU is like Renekton one trick in some matches. Like, for me, BUBU is like, if he plays Renekton, he's insane. If he doesn't play Renekton, he can be really bad. He doesn't need to be, but he can be. So when he played Renekton, actually Bin was even above BUBU with Renekton. So for me, Renekton is key, but it also can be like beneficial for Sanin, because they have shown already that Bin can play around Renekton with Gunplank, that is a scaling champion. He's not a dominant champion in lane. So again, I fully agree that top esports has played that kind of style, that Karsa is in the top side all the time, but they have to rely so much in the team fights and how Jakilov is going to play and I'm going to play if they want to win that way. Because I think the safer way to win this matchup is to play around mid and bot lane, not top lane. But it's styles, you know. You never know if they're going to adapt.
I don't think Karsa knows what bot lane is. I don't think Jakilov and Uyanja want him there. I actually don't want to see him go to Uyanja's lane either. So, you know, thank you, Mr. Karsa. Please stay away. But yeah, this matchup is a lot closer than anyone would have expected, like, you know, a month ago.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, by the way, one thing, since we haven't actually talked specifically about Knight directly very much, another reason why, like, I was one of the people last year where I was like, because I tried to actually watch LPL, I was pretty early to catch on to, like, the Knight train. Obviously, everyone got onto it this split when they thought they were going to win the LPL itself when they were in the semis and they went to the final. But, like, one of the factors that I think makes this guy so insane is he's not just, like, a monster carry, insane laner, like, play, as we say, play without fucking junglers your whole career, seemingly, just do whatever you need to do. But even more than that, you alluded to it earlier, like the guy has the term champion ocean shouldn't even be allowed for anyone else except this guy. In his whole career, he always plays loads of champions. And I've got the stat for you here. So he played 37 regular split games this summer, right? The most he played any champion was 6 times.
Yeah.
And he won on something insane, like, I don't know, like 15 champions. So, like, the guy can basically just do whatever he wants. Like, this guy is, like, it's funny that we live in a world where I know now, obviously, people acknowledge the Chinese teams, but in the past, not only was it Korean teams, but everyone said the Korean players were all the best. It's like, listen, mate, if Chovi's better than Knight, it ain't by much. It ain't by much at all.
Yeah. And I remember, I don't think who was in 2016, that he was insanely praised for playing also like an insane amount of champions in the LPL. And that you have to give that to Knight, because he doesn't only play a lot of champions, he plays insanely well with most of them. Like his Syndra is insane, his Orianna is insane, his Echo is quite nice, his Silas is insane. But at the same time, he has the ability to win lane and rotate and impact other lanes. Like, for example, for one stat, but because it's only not the stat, but also how he plays around it, he has the highest kill participation of all the mid laners in the league. And in his team, he has 77% of kill participation, which is insanely high. But the second is Jakilov with 68. Like, he has 10 percentage above the other members of his own team in terms of kill participation. Like, if you have to define TS by one player, that's 100% sure Knight.
Yeah.
And not only Knight, his style is also the definition of TS.
Yes.
I win lane, I transition to other lanes, mainly top lane, and then in teamfights to bot lane. So for me, Knight is the key factor for this team. And in this matchup, in the finals, every single time. The only thing that can like shadow Knight in terms of importance is the team fighting of Jakilov. How Jakilov positions, how Jakilov goes and backs, kites all the time in team fights. But aside that, nothing is better done by this team than what Knight does, in my opinion.
What do you think? I want to add, like, so one stat about him is he's the most solo kills in LPL this split. He's 22, which is pretty absurd to think that he's, again, playing so many different champions, getting solo kills on most of them. And going back to what I said earlier in the show, I actually said my MVP of the split was Rookie, but to me, whether it's Rookie or Knight, I think it doesn't matter. But the fact is that these are two players that are clearly above anyone else in the league at this time. And the thing about Knight that I'd say differentiates him from a player like Rookie is a very team oriented player in the sense that he's like willing to put out fires across the map. He's willing to, you know, like move top, move bot, move into the jungle, but he's not necessarily smart about it. Like he'll go help, but it's not really like calculated, you know, aggression.
It always goes in. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. To where Knight is a lot more selfish, I'd say, in the sense that he does want the extended laning phase. He wants the ganks to come to him, but he is smarter about the macro play. You know, he is going to set up for the dragons correctly, set up for the barons correctly, play the 1-3-1 beautifully. And that's where I think, like, I understand the argument for, well, this guy's the best player in LPL, because I think if you are looking at it more objectively, he is. He is playing more of the like correct style of League of Legends. And so many of TS's early games are off of his back alone. And it's going back to what you were saying a second ago, that the way TS really operates is like, he typically is the one to, if he doesn't carry a game by himself, he'll at least get them through the early game and then set up JackeyLove to be, this menace on Ezreal in the late game. And that's how TS wins so many of their games. Actually, it was against Suning. I think he played Syndra. They were losing like 10K gold in the regular split, but he hit like a 4-man scout of the week. He one-shot Huanfeng with an ultimate, and they suddenly won that game and won that series 2-0 off of his clutch factor. And
also, just for Westerns to identify the styles, for me, Knight is Faker in 2013 when he started, dominant, wins every lane, transitions to the rest of the team, and Rookie's Faker in 2015. Obviously, Rookie has had so many styles, but the current style of Rookie is the team building player that wins by making the team better, not by making himself better. Even though he's also really good in lane, like insanely in lane. But for example, against LGD, I see Knight punishing Shige, because even though she is experienced and he was not going to lose normally, Knight could do that. But Rookie, harder. Not because he's worse, just because he's not been playing that way lately.
Right, the one team we haven't talked about yet is obviously Jingdong, the reigning champions of the league. Yeah. Now, one of the most interesting things about this team was, if anyone wants a little shock, because the LPL always has them, there's so many games, they're all best of threes, they weren't looking like the best LPL team. They weren't looking like they were going to win LPL. In fact, actually, the ridiculous thing is, because that mid-season COP was right afterwards, which is where, basically, if you're one of the haters like me who thinks actually that top should have won the spring, you were just like so justified, like, yes, that's what should have happened. Yep. I knew the overrated Zoom, like he's good, but like he's not the god, like, it's calmed down. Well, if you watch the first part of the split, that all looked like that was also applying to Jingdong. Like, they actually were looking like kind of rocky. Like, they had some issues. They weren't in top form. In fact, even Zoom was having some kind of bad games actually for a guy who was hailed as like best top player in the world. But we end up here, semi-finals. They're still favoured to go to the final. If anything, they've got a chance to repeat. So you start us off on this one, Frata. Where is Jingdong at? Like, what's the story of Jingdong this split for you?
Jingdong has had the strangest calendar I have seen in a team in professional play in my life. Like, they started the season, because it's only single round robin, against the best teams in the league. They played TS, B5, I think B5, well, at least IG in the early. And then the best team that they faced, I think it was, exactly B5. B5 is the one that they faced later. It was the only team from the upper standings that they faced in the late part of the season. Like FPS, IG, SN, all of those teams were in the early part of the season and TS. So they lost against TS and B5, who are the teams that play the most aggressive style in early, and they won against the teams that are smarter. So in my opinion, this is a kind of team that is really well in Korea, but not so much in LPL. Actually, this team will win the season maybe in Korea, but in LPL, they will have many flaws that enemy teams can take attention on. So, for example, take into consideration the playoffs teams. I think TS should win 100% against Jingdong, because actually they punish so much the mid lane that their whole situation of trying to clash waves, trying to have 1-3-1 in a sense in the late game, it doesn't work against TS. Because they are going to fight you and they're going to kill you 5x5 or 5x3 or 5x4, doesn't matter. Even 4x5, they're going to kill you. So for me, it's complicated because they are facing LGD, right? And if they were facing IG, they will probably lose, in my opinion. But as we said earlier, the way that LGD showed their dominance against IG, that is not going to work against Jingdong. Because Zoom is way more stable than the Shy. The bot lane is way consistent. Like, it's probably the most consistent bot lane I have seen the last 3 years of professional play. And Lumao is insane. Like, Lumao can win lanes that you should not win ever. And if you lead them Bard, I used the Spanish word. If you lead them Bard, I think he's going to carry alone. So for me, it's a situation that all the other teams in the bracket will not 100% win, but have higher chances than LGD to win against Jingdong. So
I've got a follow-up question along those lines then. Like, I'm not normally a guy who knows much about the meta, so I'm going to wade in a little bit here, but I'll ask this. So on my other shows, when we've talked about some of the other regions, one of the things they think is going to be a big factor is that on like the newest patches, like for example, a lot of the bot lane meta is like, it's more like you have to be able to play certain things. Like if people are going to play Kate Morgana, you have to have the right counter picks set right. Obviously part of what won them the last split was Lamau had all the support counter picks. Is this going to be a factor again if they end up playing against top? Because obviously everyone wants to see that rematch at this point in time, and the one person, as we've pointed out, that gets the flame on top is their support. So would that still be a factor if they play a second time, you think?
I'm not sure. I think it's going to be a factor with LGD because of Mark, Leona, specifically. Like I think depends on how they play around the Mark's Leona, either ban it or pick it for Lumao or counter with a strange pick, because obviously you're not going to pick Bart against Leona in lane. That could that could define how the matchup is going. But in terms of the finals, for me it's not a factor because Yujanja and the laning phase of Jackie Love is not going to punish the pull of either Lumao or Loken.
Okay. Thoughts on Jingdong generally, Lyric?
So this team is another one that falls under that Team Liquid category where a lot of their wins were very unconvincing. Like even in their last series, I think it was against OMG, they fell down like 3 or 4K gold in game one. And again, OMG is like 15th in LPL. So that shouldn't happen. But for me, early on in the split, this team was kind of having an identity crisis with the meta. Because if you looked at, like you look at Zoom in spring, Zoom played one game of Renekton in spring and it was in the LPL finals. And I think that was one of the games they lost too, actually. So we come into spring, we see things like Ornn are starting to get buffed. Aatrox is completely out of the meta. Mordekaiser wasn't really played early on in summer, made a resurgence a bit later. So Zoom was having a trouble like finding champions he could play. He kept trying to play Renekton early in the split. It wasn't working. He didn't play Wukong, and Wukong was extremely strong early in summer. So we really saw Zoom just getting destroyed by everyone. I think Lumao in the first 2 weeks, again, was playing horribly. I don't know if that was because, again, coming off MSC, maybe they took a break. Maybe they weren't scrimming. You know, you just won LPL. You just played all of playoffs. So I'm sure they didn't get a break before MSC. So, you know, using that time efficiently, taking it off. They lost to Top Esports and RNG early on. So it wasn't a big thing. But this team had to change their play style. A lot of teams figured out how they played around jungle because in spring, they actually gave up a lot of gank opportunities in like their top lane and mid lane would give up a lot of waves to enable Kanavi to go take enemy camps. So we saw a lot of teams early on, like RNG, playing around that like very efficiently with Xiaohu, being able to follow up faster, find these kills onto Kanavi. And they've actually switched to a more heavy ganking style, which is a bit strange because we see Kanavi playing so much Lee Sin this split, and he's not playing a really like invade heavy style. He's not playing to just farm up. He is like
which is weird considering the meta, right? Because he was the farming jungler when it wasn't that meta, and now when it is, he's switched it up.
Exactly. It actually makes no sense. And he still has that other style, right? He still is playing Graves a lot. He is still playing, he pulled out Lilia in his last series, but he's added a new dimension to his style, which he still played Lee Sin in spring, just not as much. He still could gank, but now it's been a lot more about playing with his laners, especially midway through the split. And it's only now at the end where JDG, in my opinion, have started to transition back to playing through Kanavi and playing through jungle. They actually have the highest counter pick percentage for jungle in the entire league. So, you know, like everything about JDG is setting up for Kanavi. And this team is, in my opinion, one of the smartest teams in LPL in mid and late game. So it's about, hey, can we anchor the early game? Can maybe Kanavi get off some ganks on Lee Sin? Maybe we can go in like 20 minutes even. And then we're really going to be able to out-rotate, get the good vision in late game, find some picks with Lumao's Bard. And that's how they're going to pick up their wins.
It's like a home team. And at the same time, it's a team that, as you said, it's true that they didn't play well in the early season. But I also remember that they lost against B5, I think, in like the last few weeks. Yeah, recently. And thing is, it's really simple in theory to see how to win them because you have to crash in early, don't let Kanavi invade jungling all the time. But it's not so easy to execute because you have to have the players, like insane great players, to punish that early game. So for me, it's a team that I wouldn't worry about Canavi playing Lee Sin this year. I mean, this semester, because I think he played to adapt and to the Bears their style.
Yeah.
But in terms to come to playoffs, I don't think it's going to be a factor because he has played a lot of Graves, a lot of, as we said, Nidalee, Kindred, that is being recently played. So I feel like, to sum it up, he's going to play to his maximum level, and I don't think it's going to be a factor. Which could be a factor is Zoom, because in the last patch, I think they buffed Lucian, and we have seen a lot of Lucian in the round 1 and quarters. And they have seen Lucian also to counter Jace. I think View played it once at least. And I don't think that Langshi is the type of player that will pick a Lucian to counter, but actually they counter-picked the Shy in the matchup of the quarterfinals. So probably they have a side effect there that if Langshi plays as they played against IG, they can actually have an impact on Zoom. But saying that in my mind is so scary because I'm talking about Zoom, right? I'm not talking about a random top laner. I'm talking about the most stable and efficient and tanky top laner of the league. So I don't know. I think Canavi is not going to be a factor negative to GDG.
Yeah.
But Zoom could be. And for me, the worst factor would be the bot lane in case that they play too scary. Not scary, but too passive. Like if Loken plays as passive and consistent as he played, he doesn't reply to what Mark offers and Kramer offers.
And
that's my.
It's like you said. I actually feel like this team does have a chance to beat teams like TS and Suning. Like it's not impossible, but their best matchup is definitely LGD. Like this to me should be a free finals appearance for JDG. And with the points they got from Spring, as long as JDG makes top 2, they're going to Worlds. So they should feel extremely happy about the side of the bracket they're on because LGD does play a slower paced game. And again, JDG's smartest team in LPL, hands down. They do play that more, not necessarily now, but the traditional Korean style of, they get the setup first, they get the vision down. Everything is very step by step. And I can't imagine them going down to a team like LGD.
Did you say earlier, Frata, that you're actually picking Suning to beat top?
Yes. I think that it's, in terms of like the situation, TS is the favorite for the community, for everyone.
Yes.
But after seeing the playoffs and how the matchup is, I will pick a win for Suning. I think it's not like common. Most people will disagree with me, but I will say
definitely spicy.
Suning,
Well, in that case, the question is this then: if they win that series, do they win the LPL?
Good question. Let me think.
Oh God,
that's a good.
I'm ready for this one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that, as we said earlier, LGD is a worse matchup for, a better matchup. It's easier to win against LGD than to Suning for Jadon. But Suning has too many rookies, in my opinion. Like, I feel like the experience and the strategy is better in a final for Jadon if they were to face Suning. Like, because, for example...
I could feel your heart wants to say it. Your heart wants to say
but I disagree. My mind is telling me no.
Right, okay.
Like, for example, Canavi against SOFM. It's Canavi against SOFM.
Of course, yeah.
Like, how can SOFM not be a hemorrhage and lose 100 of gold every second that the game passes against Canavi? So, I'm not going to say it because I don't think it. But obviously, I have been in the Suning Hub train just because of seeing Bean so explosive. Like, I really trust that Bean is going to be the next the Shy in the next year, for sure.
And Lyric, based on what you're saying, do you have top esports winning?
Yeah, I have TS going to finals. And, like, to me, all the rest of the playoffs are honestly so hard to predict. Like, I even don't think the Suning prediction's outrageous for someone who follows LPL. I know for, like, more casual fans, it'll sound crazy, but in the playoffs, I get it. But I think we are having the JDG dynasty of 2020, and I think JDG are going to take down TS in the finals.
Okay.
This is LS, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so cut the Western shit.
This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Whattathings, Spencer Green, Soliko, Dean Tanglis, Jack Hanna, Hades, Jensen Goh, the Puyallup Tribe, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to put a question to me in my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers for my upcoming content? Or maybe to even take part in an online esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.